Hi guys, Video Jesus here, and we have an exciting deep dive into looking at the newfound Brian Higgins Karen retrial A14 CPD CCTV footage. So before we get started, make sure that you like, subscribe to my channel. Also, feel free to donate to the Free Karen Read Fund. The link is in the description, as well as my Venmo link if you want to throw Video Jesus a little love. Spend a lot of money on some plugins. No, seriously. Links are below, and just make sure you like and subscribe, and I hope you like the content. So let's dive into what we're going to be discussing today. So I was able to take the court TV footage that we all saw in court that was, again, filmed by a pool camera to a very uncalibrated monitor. That monitor is going to be like the death of me, I'm not going to lie. So it makes analyzing footage this time around a little bit more difficult. Again, this is why videos like this are kind of important, just so you know exactly what you're seeing. So I was able to take the court TV stream that we all saw on day 14, and I was able to enhance it using super upscale resolution models using Python and OpenCV, as well as multiple denoiser plugins, including Neat Video. If you've never tried Neat Video, it is absolutely fantastic if you're in the production industry or if you're just looking at low resolution video and you want to really get rid of that fine noise. I also used a plugin called Denoiser 3, and that's by Red Giant, the Magic Bullet suite. And that's through Maxon. If you have not tried Magic Bullet, it is absolutely great. It's a great plugin. Without getting too technical, a lot of things can happen when you're working with low resolution footage. You can get spatial artifacts that includes micro blocking, ringing, blurring, mosquito noise, color and tone artifacts, as well as temporal artifacts, which really include jutter, skipping, ghosting, frame blending. We kind of saw this a lot with the Sally port. And then some other distortions can happen with codec specific, which can include that staircase effect. So when we see compression that almost looks like a staircase, that's another compression artifact that we can typically see with low resolution footage. When you're working with these super detailed resolution upscale models, you can really remove some of these compression artifacts going to enhance footage. That way we can look at the footage, how it should be looked at, and we can remove all of those compression artifacts and see some details that I think with this enhanced footage you can see that we didn't actually see in the court TV footage. All right, guys, so we're going to be going through a couple different videos today. So we'll go through the video that I was able to enhance, and then we'll also go through a heat map video, and I'll explain a little bit what a heat map is. The model that I used to do this was also a deep learning model, so we will get all into that. But first, let's figure out our point of reference. So where, in relation to certain objects in the scene, we can tell where the cameras were placed. So for the first shot that we're going to look at in the enhanced footage, the rear lot main. So the objective here is to really find where the camera is mounted, and we can do that by pointing out objects of interest or people in the scene. One of the big points of reference in the first angle is this light pole, right? You can see this on the enhanced footage. We can actually see this truck, and this actually looks similar to the same truck that we see on Google Maps, and it is very close to the light pole. So it actually might be a Canton police department vehicle, and this might just be the designated spot. What we can see too is that there is this other car here. So that's why I say this is probably where Higgins parked, but this car could be over here, and then Higgins would be in this fourth spot. So either one of those two spots would definitely be exact to what we are looking at in this frame. We can see that the light pole, we still have a little bit of lead room over here. So I do suspect that this is the exact position, and it was probably mounted on the side of the building. I know there's been other creators that have proposed that the Jeep's over here, but it's definitely over here just based on this point of interest. And then we'll also see later in the footage Higgins moving a vintage car, but I think it's actually the old police car that we saw in the first Sally port. So let's just talk really quickly about the path that Higgins took, right? We see his car park again in likely the third or fourth spot, and then we see him get out of the vehicle, walks behind the cars in the front row, and then we see him unlock his phone, probably likely Face ID. But these are the cars that we're kind of looking at. So the Jeep, third, fourth spot, cars in front, definitely texting Brian Albert. And then he walks slightly off screen. And then after he walks off screen in path, we kind of see him again walk upwards. And then we kind of see him more in the foreground as opposed to the background. So he's pretty close to the camera at this point. And that's where we see him walk off frame and likely into the Sally Port area. All right, and now let's evaluate our second angle, the church side parking lot. So we can assume that the camera is probably in this little 90-degree angle, the edge of the building. And we can know that because we have our point of reference of that dumpster, right? And then really close by that is this truck. And we can see here, the truck would have been here in the Google Maps. So we do have like this. So this is like the first parking spot. So we know that the camera is, we can see a little bit of the second. So the second is like just briefly cut off. We also have our point of reference of this island. So as you can see, when he's walking really close to the camera, this island really is in direct center of the frame. So we still have a little bit of lead room over here, and we have a lot of lead room over here. All right, so now that we have a good understanding of where the cameras are located in all the scenes, and we'll go over it again, especially in the hallway, let's play the footage from start to beginning, and I will stop during the frames that I think are pretty interesting. I'll answer some of the questions that I got on YouTube, and if there's any other questions after this video, definitely feel free to leave some comments, and I can definitely do a follow-up as well. All right, so we definitely see Higgins getting out of the car. And again, see how that anomaly moves a little bit? I think that's really just the snow that we're seeing and some compression artifacts. I think that really is just a seat here. So just going back, we definitely see him using his phone for Face ID. Long clip, like it's not a very short clip. So he was in his car for a while. He's definitely standing around here for a lot longer than it would take if he was just going inside and grabbing something quick. Then he goes near our path. Notice the sweatshirt that he's wearing. So we're going to be seeing this sweatshirt a lot with that pattern on the back. And that might explain a little bit once we get towards this a little bit more. All right, I got another question in regards to this shadowy figure right here. And let me just go into a second render of what we have. Shadow silhouette was a person. It's not. It definitely is just a shadow at nighttime. So I don't think that that's actually another person. You can kind of see that with this enhanced footage. And then even the other more cropped in footage that I was able to render out. So we'll just play this through. All right, here's where it kind of gets interesting. So there's a big debate whether this is Brian Higgins or Brian Albert. And again, he's wearing the same sweatshirt that he was wearing at the waterfall. So I'm hard pressed, for reasons that we'll get into in a second, that this is Brian Albert. I actually do think that this is Brian Higgins. So one of the reasons why people were saying this was because it looks like he has a mustache and a beard maybe. I actually think that this is really hard shadows. If we look at the light source, we can see these shadows on top. And then when he turns his head, if we're going to go really slow frame by frame through this, but I think this is just basically a shadow under his nose, a shadow under his chin. I don't think that that's actually facial hair in general. And again, this is what we call temporal distortion. I actually think this is probably natural temporal distortion, and it's probably due to latency of the camera. So the camera having a little bit of latency can definitely cause that to happen. So we see him coming in. I mean, it's really not a clear picture, but it does look like there's and it's right here. So when he kind of turns his face a little bit, you can kind of see he doesn't have any facial hair. It's pretty non-existent. And then when he turns his head right here, so you can see that it kind of looks like before that there was a little bit of a shadow above. I think that the facial hair or the beard that people are seeing is definitely just hard shadows from the ceiling light above. But you really can't say for certain. But I do think that this is Brian Higgins. I don't think it's actually Brian Albert. It is very odd how we can't get a clear picture of him. So if you don't follow me on Twitter, I actually broke the story of what room he was going into. So he was actually going into room 122. And I want to thank Sleuthy Goosey, because she was the one that actually posted the blueprint of the building on one of the posts that I had. Where they went to was this communication center here. And we know that just from looking at this blueprint, it's really important to know the objects of reference in the scene. So we can look at the map here. So we know of where General Lee Higgins went in, which was this side of the Sally Port. He went through this door, which I labeled in yellow. And then we also have this water fountain here in turquoise. And that is this object here. And then we have a little bit of store here in green, which we can see here, a little bit longer orange wall. And then we have this two-part doorway. And then again, this yellow line represents the door right here that he's going into. He might have waved to somebody in the dispatch center, but I mean, it is plausible that maybe he went through this door, waved to somebody, and then went into this communications equipment room. And why do I say that? Like, why else would you go into the communications center? So what is in this communications equipment room? So usually what's stored in this room is either servers, MVRs, DVRs, and honestly, Faraday bags. And most of the time they do store Faraday bags in these types of rooms just for even added extra security, and they are technically communications equipment. Also explains why there's 6 minutes missing. So in day 14, when Alan Jackson was questioning Yuri Buchanan on the actual timestamps, which I'm glad that they did this time, because they didn't really do that last time, he was questioning Buchanan on why the video jumped. Since if he went in there, he was doing something, he deleted himself going in there twice. So maybe he deleted something that he was doing inside, outside. I mean, it's really not that hard to delete security camera footage. It's actually pretty easy. I definitely think he went in there. I think he went into the communications equipment room. I think he deleted footage. I think he was doing something that he didn't want anybody else to see. He went in this room twice, even though we only see him going into this room once. And maybe that's the reason why. We see him come out of the door, go in there, missing 6 minutes almost. And we'll actually do another video of the actual timestamps too. That's him going over to the old vintage car, which I believe that was the old Sallyport police vehicle that we saw in Karen Reed 1 for the Sallyport footage. Turning on the car. He's getting back out. We can see that figure. And I think he's cleaning off the windows, which again, I think is kind of ironic. The whole reason why they brought Karen Reed's Lexus to the Canton Sallyport is because it supposedly has a heated garage. So why does he need to clean off the windows of the old police vehicle, if that's what it was? It looks like he's wiping off the windows. The car's heating up. And I say that because once the snow stops falling, because before we just saw the windows that were very white, so it looks like he's wiping off the snow on the windows here. And there was a little bit of questions about if people said that they saw a little bit of movement behind these cars, which I kind of see it, but it's hard to say if whether that's a compression artifact or if that's an actual person walking behind the vehicles. I'm almost hard pressed to say that it might just be compression artifacts, but we'll see if it gets interesting. It's definitely still right there now. Could see that for sure. Then it starts snowing pretty hard, so it's hard to really see anything at this point. It does look like he's wiping off the car still. Let's just zoom out so we can see a little bit more. I think this is probably the cleanest render of the video that I have, to be honest. I mean, it's still a little blurry, but it gets rid of the noise and the grain and some of the artifacts. It makes it a little bit easier to clear. Vehicle going. And let's just go frame by frame, and I'll tell you why I think it's the cop car, right? So we have a good frame. I think it's around here. So it looks like that this car is going past our truck, our very end truck that's right near the light post. And look at this. So you can kind of see a little bit of a siren right here. I think that this is the old Sallyport police car. And then obviously you can't really make out some of the other details just because there's a lot of snow on it. So that might be why it looks more like a sports car or like a Corvette as opposed to the old Canton Sallyport police car. All right, let's zoom out again. Play this from the top. And so, yeah, this figure behind here. So again, just getting back to the figure that people are very interested in figuring out if that's a person or what is that. I actually think that's a car or maybe one of the mobile radar machines. That would make sense too, because it's not really moving, which it looks like it's moving because some of the snow artifacts of that elongated snow that's caused by, again, shutter blur, but I don't see it really moving. It looks pretty static to me. But again, that's why it's really cool to enhance footage because we see why it looks like it's moving, right? Because we see snowflakes going past it. It looks like it's actually moving, but I don't think it's moving. I think it's just snowflakes in the background. So we can assume that he moved it back into the Sallyport garage because, again, the last time we saw the car, or the old police car, if that was in fact the old police car, was in the Sallyport garage. So we know that he went in there, which makes it more interesting if that was the old police car, because we don't have that footage. Right at this point, we have Homeboy enter the frame again. And from my understanding, so Higgins had a work truck, a surveillance vehicle, and then the Jeep. So only one truck. So we see two trucks here in the scene, right? So we see this truck, we see that truck. I wonder what the relation is to this truck because he turns on this vehicle. So we know he has the keys to this vehicle, he has the keys to this vehicle, but not so much this vehicle. It should also be noted that, Higgins Jeep doesn't have a lot of snow at this point, but neither does this vehicle. This vehicle does not have as much snow as this vehicle, so we can tell this vehicle's probably been sitting around for longer. But this one looks like it has the same amount of snow as Higgins Jeep. That's weird. I feel like that's very, very odd. You know what? The truck. Starts wiping that off. I'll try to keep track of him. What is this? Because the duffel bag comes in later. But he definitely grabs something. I actually think this kind of looks like a bag of some kind. He's at the truck. Snowing pretty hard. It is pretty weird though. So we have some kind of bag. I think it's probably like a Faraday bag. So then we definitely see Higgins on the side of the truck, the one with the most snow. Walks around it. Goes into the Jeep. Maybe he's just getting the keys to that car. Looks like he remote starts it. Goes over to the vehicle. Or unlocks it at least. Then he gets inside. He appears to move it up a little bit, so he definitely has the keys to that car because it is moving forward. Looks like he gets out. Goes to the truck that literally has no snow on it. Gets something from that vehicle. This is like this first time that he goes into that door. Shuts the door. All right, and here is the point that he grabs the duffel bag, or we think is a duffel bag. So let's zoom in on this to get a good frame. There's definitely rustling some stuff in there up on this frame. So we can see here that this is the back seat. This is the truck caddy. At this point, we know that he's getting some kind of duffel bag, but do you see this blob? Some sort of object around, whether it's maybe in the back seat and then grabbing the duffel bag, but let's look at that again. So there's our duffel bag. He gets it out of the vehicle. And then it appears to move something around because now we have this white highlight, this white blob, which I think is the same white blob in the background. I mean, I think honestly we found Chloe. Or maybe it's John O'Keefe. I mean, it would make sense. It'd make a lot more sense than a garage where somebody could accidentally walk in. Let's just put it in this way. I mean, look, who is going to look for a dead body at a police station, whether it's a dog or a person? I mean, it's actually a pretty good move. And that's when you can kind of see the shape of the bag a little bit more. So if we stop on this frame right here, we can see the general shape of the bag. So it does look like a pretty large bag. I know that, again, a lot of people are thinking that this is a portable stretcher of some kind, maybe. Like, that's definitely a possibility because it is very long. Goes to the Jeep, looks like he opens up the door. Maybe to turn the lights in the back seat or just to pop the trunk. Because we see that duffel bag again. I'm walking around with it. And that's probably the clearest image that we have of the back seat of him putting that object in. Comes back around, then turns on his headlights. So this is actually probably the most interesting part, I think, of the video. And I actually have a heat map that shows this. So there was also questions I want to answer that a lot of people didn't know if this was Higgins because, you know, the black sweatshirt that he was wearing, it doesn't look like he's wearing like hooded now. It looks like it's a different color, but I also want to keep in mind that we have the reason why that it doesn't look like he's wearing a black sweatshirt is we have this overhead light here. So it's really just the bright lighting situation. So overhead lighting here. We also have the headlights go on around here. So
I actually do think that he is hooded when he goes into the front seat of this car. So I always try to pay attention to the scene, and that's why we mapped this out initially when we started going through this analysis of where the lighting sources were. So we know that if he's in this area, he's going to be a lot brighter than if he's in this area. And that might be too why it looks like there's a change of clothes, or that he's wearing, again, like a hat as opposed to a hood. And it's hard to tell because, again, when we enhance footage, we're not really recreating the pixels. We're just removing the compression and noise artifacts. So we can't add things back into the picture. It would be really great if we could get these license plates, if we could get a little bit more fine detail. And there are some learning models that will do that. It's artificial, so it's not what was there initially. Those kind of models I don't really like to use too much just because it can add in details that weren't there. The learning models that I did first, just regular denoising, upscale resolution models, I did use Essagon. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And that one will add in, it's a machine learning model, so it will add in different textures and stuff. So that's why I did 2 renders of that, just so we actually know, is it there or was this computer AI? So that's why it's important to have a couple different renders just to look at, especially if you're using deep learning models. Honestly, we want to make sure that we're actually getting an accurate picture because we can't just add in things and textures into the scene unless you're Colleen Crawford, and that wouldn't be unethical of you. But okay, so I digress. Let's go into this when he's starting to open up the truck door. I actually still think he's wearing the hoodie at this point. So do you see how now it looks like he's not wearing a hoodie, so the top of his head is really bright? That's, again, going to be from the vehicle lights on the top, inside in the interior of the vehicle. So that's why he's being really lit up right now. Then we can still see kind of a texture of almost, it looks like he does still have the hoodie up. Somebody said this looks like a backwards cap. It kind of does a little bit. Keep in mind, too, is that we still have our light source over here. So it could just be, I still think it's the same sweatshirt, to be honest. And here is where it gets interesting, right? So we see him open this door, and we know from that the interior lights are on just because he just went into this door, the top of his head lit up. This to me looks like the front seat of the truck, so the driver's side. And then we have this like very large object, and we can kind of see the really fine details of this with just the enhancement. So this doesn't look like, it's too lumpy to be a back seat. And also, if we're looking at the scale, if this is a driver's side front headrest, it's going to go down, so that looks like a correct shape. And we have our overhead light on here. This would be a very, very high back seat. And you can see that when he kind of moves in front of it. And then this is the interesting part. So I want you to pay attention to the shift. So see that? You can see these white pixels move here. And that's not snow. This is definitely him adjusting something in the back seat.
And for the sake of time, we'll just speed this up a little bit. So he walks off a frame. We're just gonna ramp this up to fast motion. He goes in the car, goes back out.
And then we kind of see him carry this large illuminated object. I do think this might be a snow scraper, but it's pretty large for a snow scraper, to be honest. Elongated right here. He flips it to the side. We can kind of see the shadow on the car. And then he goes around. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think that's actually a snow brush. It looks like almost like a broom. So we can see the elongation of the brush. He kind of turns it around when he's walking with it. We can see a little bit of that shadow. And then he goes in between here. And then it actually appears here from when he's walking in between these cars. He flips the object so it's almost in front of him. And then we have this part. So I almost want to say that it's a snow brush.
So the rest of this stuff isn't like super terribly interesting. We see him get into the car, definitely checking his iPhone. You can see a little bit of a flash there. But yeah, he looks like he's pretty comfy in the Jeep now. He's about to take off. And last, we see him leave. So we're going to run out of time, but I just wanted to briefly explain what heat mapping is. And we will do a full tutorial on it. So here's just a little bit of an explanation of what a heat map is. And look forward to our part 2
because we ran out of time today, but I definitely will do a follow-up on this that will fully explain heat mapping. So heat mapping in video forensics is a technique that transforms motion data into a color-coded overlay, highlighting where activity concentrates over time. As an object or people move, the map uses a spectrum from cool blue to hot red to show low and high activity zones. This visual summary helps investigators quickly identify movement patterns and hotspots, making it easier to analyze surveillance footage and pinpoint key evidence. So we'll continue to explore a few little nuggets in addition to what we find in the Karen Read footage. And starting next week, I will be live streaming. So I'm going to try to start live streaming the 27th. So yeah, stay tuned to the Video Jesus channel, doing live streams. We'll continue to explore some of these bombshells of the enhanced Brian Higgins footage. And thanks again for watching.